article a while back about your biggest regrets. What prompted you to write the article?
So that topic, it's something that has probably been on my mind for a long time, and probably something honestly that I should have written years ago, and probably even something that I didn't realize was as big of an issue until I started coaching. And as a player, looking back on, I realize, and I think we touched on this a little bit in the past couple episodes, that as a young athlete, early on in my career, in my late teenage years, my early 20s, as far as stuff went, physical maturity, pitching stuff, all the other stuff, the physical fundamentals of pitching, I was fine. I was progressing, doing a lot really well. Looking back on it now, the weakest part of my game was what was going on between my ears. And a lot of that unfortunately had to do with immaturity, had to do with just like what happens in dugouts, the culture that surrounds dugouts, the stuff that's talked about. And unfortunately at that time, looking back on it, I didn't have anybody to call me out on it. I didn't have anybody that would help me realize how detrimental, how bad towards progress, towards development, how I was talking about things, how I was thinking about things led to my inconsistencies on the field. For example, if I didn't have a great game, if I didn't have a great start, at the end of the day, back then we talked about the only way I communicated with parents was to talk on the phone. So I remember, and it was usually too late to do it that night, but I remember getting on the phone with Dad the next day, and if I had a great game, we would talk about all the great things I did, how everything went well. And if I had a bad game, it was more often than not about umpire missed some calls, my defense made some errors, why the coach didn't do this or did that, even sometimes field conditions. The mound had some issues with it, maybe it was raining, which are all a part of it. As an athlete, you have to learn how to compete with that stuff.
Playing an outdoor sport.
Yep, and getting into now as a coach, I've been doing this now full time for almost 15 years, working with kids and closely with their parents. And we sit down when I work with families and kids. We sit down before we start working, and we will go over, how their last week went, how practice went, did they do any work at home, how did the games go, and if things didn't go very well, usually, and this isn't just families I work with currently, this is, looking back on it, this has been going on since
Generally speaking.
since I started coaching.
Yeah.
And, it's things that I honestly should have been calling out students and their parents sooner, writing about these things sooner, because it is such a cultural type thing. Mm-hmm. Like the culture of youth sports is to heavily point fingers when things don't go right. Even though the umpires miss calls, 100%, it happens, right? There are bad field conditions. It is what it is, right? Your fielders are going to make errors, just like we as athletes, as pitchers make errors. When we're in the field, we make errors, right? But when things don't go right, the easy out is to point fingers at all that other stuff instead of looking closer at, like, did I, as the pitcher, did I execute pitches? Was I leaving pitches up and over the plate too much? Was I throwing too many pitches out of the zone? Did I field my position? Was I backing up bases? Did they get that extra base because I wasn't doing my part, right? So there's all these little things that are way more important to talk about and give attention to than all the uncontrollables. Uncontrollables are things like umpires, teammates, coaches, even parents in the stands, the stuff that they say. Like, as an athlete, I have no control over what is being said or being done. So I have to learn how to manage that. And it can be tough. It's really tough, especially for young athletes, to ignore that stuff, right? As a professional, we have to learn how to deal with hecklers in the stands, right? it's silly, right? But sometimes that stuff does affect players, and we have to, as adults, we have to be able to get past that stuff. But again, it will always be there. But you have to learn how to manage your emotions. But the reason that I wrote that article and that I share it, I think I wrote that article a couple years ago actually, and I reshare it probably every couple of months because I see how much that topic is needed to be talked about. And in other ways, I talk about that topic often, not through just that article that I wrote, but it is such a weakness. And as athletes, we hold ourselves back from development, from getting better. When things don't go my way, if I'm constantly pointing fingers, it needs to be talked about and have a lot of focus given on it. And the parents are a part of that conversation, and so are the coaches, because they are a big part of the attitudes instilled in these players from those young ages by the conversations they allow, the conversations they participate in, and even worse, they encourage the conversations by what they say.
But it goes back to that kind of innate self-preservation that we all have and we all do. So is it just a matter of maturing out of it? Are you just trying to bring awareness to one's thinking and their, I guess when they're analyzing their performance, bringing attention to the mistakes that they have made and how it isn't right to point the finger at somebody else?
It's absolutely a maturity thing. And even though as adults we're supposed to be mature, and you think adults, you think mature, when the adults are having and participating in these conversations, they are absolutely feeding the immaturity, because even with them, there's a side to them that is not there yet. Like, they are immature. And again, it's not to be mean, but there are things that need to be talked about. And the part of this weakness in our athletes is because of the weakness in the adults. And the culture, again, like you sit in a dugout, if the umpire misses one call and a coach says something, the whole dugout starts talking about it. And once that whole dugout starts talking about it, now they question literally every single call, and the focus is on that versus all the other stuff going on in a game where the players and the coaches should be focused. And then to make it worse, you go home, and in the car ride home and at the dinner table, it's being talked about when it just shouldn't be. Like, to really develop quickly, there has to that you want a full attention on all the controllables: my energy, my effort, my production, my preparation.
So if I see that in my kid and we're on our way home from the game or the tournament or whatever, and they're like, oh, that umpire sucked, or I can't believe so-and-so in center field missed that ball, blah, 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 blah. Me as the parent, how can I, in a productive way, talk to or ask my child questions to try to get them, bring that to the surface, the self-accountability. Like, well, did you hit your spots, or give your center fielder a break? Like, that was a difficult catch and he missed it. Like, how do you, as the parent, kind of, I don't want to do gentle parenting, but like, how do you do it in a nice way so that they start that reflection in an honest way? Because you also don't want them to be like, well, I can't do anything right. Like, if everything's my fault, then I feel like there's a flip side. It's like, how do you handle it?
There's nothing wrong with acknowledging mistakes. We all do it. But with the kids I work with, I always flip it on them and I say, have you ever made an error? Right? Because kids, they love to talk about, well, my defense didn't have a great day. Like, well, have you ever made an error? And of course they have.
So you ask them a general question, not that particular situation.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't dial in on that. You're just like,
you need to flip the conversation. You got to flip it back on them and help them realize that you're talking about other people making mistakes when you literally make all the same mistakes. Like, there's no room. You have no room and no place to talk about others' mistakes because you make the same mistakes. You are not perfect, right? But again, it's just like you said, it's human nature to look for things to soften that blow.
Yeah.
Like it's uncomfortable to know that I messed up. it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like I want to do everything I can and protect my emotions and protect myself so that I deflect on everybody else's mistakes. Hey, don't talk about my mistakes. Let's talk about their mistakes. And it's just, it's a bad habit, and it's awful. I mean, you see it, and social media has a way of exaggerating everything, right? And it's out there all the time, and it's not healthy at all.
So then do you think that this article resonates with, I'll just say parents, because most of your students are younger. Do you think this, what you wrote, resonates with so many people because it brings to light, and they're like, oh, like a light bulb moment, and they're like, oh, we could probably approach this differently rather than just pointing fingers?
Well, the hope is, and again, like I said, I write about this topic in different ways weekly. The hope is that people do read it and they do think about it versus taking it personally. Because once they take it personally, they're probably going to stop following. They're probably going to get defensive, because of it. And I do have followers that will comment on stuff and start rolling back at me with excuses because I'm talking about their excuses. Yeah, buts. But the goal is that it does help the adults look a little bit closer at the decisions that they make, whether it's physical decisions